Welcome to the Sports Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Luhr, and today we're crossing over for a morning coffee with a very old friend of mine, Mr. Hide Arai, calling in from Paris. Welcome to the podcast, Hide.
Hi. Nice to see you, Marcus.
Yeah.
I mean, really is an honor to be on this platform, your podcast.
Appreciate that, and it's my honor. And before we, of course, get into all these great stories here, which we've been already discussing the last few calls we had here, let me just sort of introduce yourself a little more to folks who might not know you. Hide,
all right.
And I'll get into a minute of how we met and all this stuff, and then we'll, of course, get into your stories here. So Hide and I know each other for now almost 27 years. We first met in 1994 at the Football World Cup in the US, where I, as a young man, right straight out of college, had a great opportunity to work there. And Hide was already there at that time working with ISL. So we're going to get back to that later.
It was Dallas, Texas.
It was in Dallas, Texas. That's right.
June 1994.
That's right. But Hide has had an illustrious career with DENTSU for over 20 years. And then the last 17 years spent with FIFA. So that's really the two big parts we're going to be looking into. What DENTSU, who it is, what they've done, and how they shape the sports marketing industry really in a very significant way, which, again, I don't think everyone actually knows. But Hide's been there and, of course, will share that with us. And, of course, FIFA had, an interesting last couple of decades with a lot of exciting things happening, but also, certain amounts of challenges. And Hide was there as well. And we definitely will hear his opinion and what happened during those eras. But, as usual, we kind of always start a bit where it all began. And maybe just to, again, frame a little bit for folks here, who is DENTSU, who's obviously the company you joined there in the mid-'80s, and this is how far we're going to go back. So, DENTSU was, I think, established in 1950, is the leading advertising agency in Japan. Right. It's a company which in yen does about $1 trillion worth of revenue in yen, which in US dollars is about 9 to 10 billion US, depending on the exchange rate a bit. So yeah, it's a significant, very large business, one of the largest, advertising agents globally. I think it's in the top 4 or 5 in the world. And because of its massive influence and these large advertising budget, it's controlled out, for Japanese companies. Especially the way the Japanese company operates is quite unique, right? In a lot of cases, DENTSU really controls those budgets, right? It's not just it manages those, but it literally decides on what to do with it, which is very different than maybe in Western world. It has a very powerful position, and not just in advertising, but as I said, we will get to that later. It obviously played that really significant role also in sports, which we'll get in there. But let's talk a bit about it. You joined them in the mid-'80s as a young man. And tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, so I joined DENTSU out of college. I was a student newspaper journalist, so I was kind of interested in media industry job. Then DENTSU happened to be there, offered me a job to start as the commercial film producer. So, a few years, I was producing Japanese television commercials. 30 seconds, 60 seconds.
Right.
So that's how my kind of a first pinch of career started.
I love it. Okay.
Then DENTSU's first association and involvement with the sports industry really started in 1982, the FIFA World Cup in Spain.
Right.
There are two kind of maverick guys of DENTSU who went to Spain, then started contacting FIFA and the other sports industry gurus. These two DENTSU guys said, we want to have the rights. We want to have the right to sell those advertising balls packages to Japanese sponsors.
Japanese companies, right, okay.
And then I think in the process, these guys met Urs Dassler, then the kind of guru or king of Dassler family, the owner of Adidas.
Yeah.
Then I think their kind of friendship bond started. So DENTSU, Adidas, Dassler family bond started.
Right. Who were these Dentsu executives? You know them, or they're well
Yeah,
known?
yeah. I know them very closely. The one guy is Hattori.
Uh-huh.
He passed away around 1994, 5,
Right.
unfortunately. But the other guy is Haru Takahashi. He still lives on.
Right.
He sat in the Tokyo Olympic Games organizing committee.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he has been like vice chairman of ISL, senior executive position in Dentsu. So he's been around. So he was like really driving force of sports marketing business at Dentsu.
Right. Yeah, and I think you mentioned before that Denso then took a role, right, to be a sponsorship consultant or agency for Asia, also for the LA Olympics in
Yeah, that's right.
1984, right? Going back
1984.
here,
Yeah,
right,
that was also part of this Takahashi Hattori legend.
right.
They brought in the Fujifilm as the blimp sponsor, the official sponsor
Okay,
of LA Olympic Games.
right,
So it was like a tough competition against Kodak back then.
right.
Well, people don't remember those film.
Yeah, that's how we
Silver
used to
headlight
take
films
photos.
right, right. But back then, like the Kodak and Fujifilm were like a
Yeah,
big consumer
huge.
goods rivalry.
Correct.
So it was a first big deal for Dentsu to get involved in real sports sponsorship.
Right, right.
I mean, as you may know, traditionally advertising agency doesn't take a risk of owning something, minimum guaranteeing something
Right.
financially.
Yeah.
But it was like the first time for Dentsu to did some financial guarantee to LA organizing committee and sell quite a few packages to Japanese sponsors.
Yeah. And again, I mean, from you maybe at that time you weren't necessarily involved yet, but I'm sure you know these stories a bit. Again, how much risk was Dentsu really taking? Because it obviously was sitting on ad dollars already, right? I mean, so you you have a bit of a secure sense of what you're selling, right? Because you know what your clients, the budgets are, right? I mean, how did you see that?
Yeah, it was kind of, portfolio management.
Right.
Dentsu had like 3,000 clients.
Right.
So if Dentsu cannot sell, say, this film package, the Silverlight film packages to Fuji, they can look for somebody else.
Right.
If they can sell, say, audio-visual category to Sony, they can sell to Panasonic, for example.
Yeah,
so that was the portfolio management Dentsu was doing.
Yeah. So. Again, I think it's anyone who knows those stories, I think it's incredible what Dentsu did there, and it still does, right? It's not that they have stopped.
It still does, yeah.
Correct, and we'll get to that later as well. Now, again, the other thing, which again I think for younger audiences here, is this obviously there was a bit of a golden era for Japanese brands, right? Again, it is sort of, I guess, 80s and 90s, right, where Japanese brands were very powerful, and really competed heavily against the big US brands or European brands, whether automobiles or, like I said, audiovisuals, the Sonys and the Panasonics of the world, and NEC, you name it, right? And again, all that kind of happened a bit at the same time as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was really like coincided with like sort of globalization of markets. There was a Harvard Business School famous professor Theodore Levitt wrote this paper called Globalization of Markets in 1983.
Right.
That was like sort of a model for Japanese brands to go overseas and start selling their TVs and automobiles, all those stuff like JVC, Panasonic, Toyota, Honda.
Yes, all the big. Exactly.
So it was kind of Dentsu was fortunate, I guess. Well, Dentsu was kind of riding on the tide or riding on the wave of those globalization of Japanese brands.
Right. Yeah, no, really interesting. And now let's capture one more other significant fact here, and that is, of course, how Dentsu then got involved with ISL. and ended up owning a piece of it, right? And we'll come back to obviously, when you got involved in it. So again, just from a facts point of view, I guess it was 1984. So after the 82 World Cup, they did a deal with ISL, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there was a little twist on that too. Up to 1982, the FIFA marketing commercial rights were owned by, to be precise, owned by Coca-Cola Company.
Okay.
So 1978 to 1982. So that's why they used to be called, the under-20 competition was called FIFA Coca-Cola World Youth Championship.
Right, okay.
And then back then, the Coke rights are represented by two British guys, John West and Patrick Nally.
Yes.
Patrick Nally still lives. So the company called West Nally was running the show, 1978 Argentina World Cup to 1982. Right. Then during the World Cup 1982 in Spain, the host Dassler brokered the deal with Haberlange, the president of FIFA, and Sepp Blatter of FIFA general secretary. So it was like host Dassler really overturned the ownership of the rights. He took over the rights from West Nally. That's when the ISL started.
I had some ex-ISLs on podcasts before as well, and of course that name Horst Dassler come up many times, and everyone seemed to always have incredible positive things to say about Horst. Of how smart he was and what an incredible businessman he was on so many levels. So so he always then cut a deal with DENTSU and they took 49%, right, of ISL.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a large piece, right?
Yeah, I think back then Dassler family needed some kind of money coming out of Asia. So what I heard, he contacted the DENTSU's rival companies in Asia, but I think in the end, because of the LA Olympic sponsorship experiences, other expertise, and also for Adidas, Japanese market was becoming more
important. Yeah, I'm sure.
So I think
it's interesting. I mean, again, that's not something which I've heard, and it's so well documented, really, that anyone who's done a bit of history on sports marketing will come across ISL, but that DENTSU will actually right behind it with a very large stake. I don't think that is as well recognized. So, which again, this is sort of why we're talking about it right now, and want to make sure that people really hear this out loud. So so they're there in 84 now, they're a partner, and of course, doing what they do. At that time, as I said, you are still in a very different part in DENTSU. You're still dealing, I think, with you're doing some international magazines and European broadcaster media rights sales, right? Just talk a bit about that before we move into the sports stuff.
I was saying more like not media rights per se, I was like a salesman selling the airtime and sponsorship of MTV. The music MTV was pretty big back then.
Okay.
Also, Eurosport had just started. Mm-hmm. Also, BSB, before merging Sky.
Right. Okay.
There was a broadcaster called BSB.
Yes.
Then Sky, and another company called Box. So we were selling those airtime mainly to Japanese sponsors.
But these were the channels in Japan, or these were the global channels you were selling it for?
Oh, these were the channels in Europe.
In Europe, right.
There were needs of Japanese sponsors to advertise in Europe.
Got it.
Yeah. So
okay,
like JVC, Sony, Panasonic. Yeah.
So how do you then transition from there into your sort of first kind of role in sports with DENTSU? Where was that moment when you went into there?
1990, I had kind of a international training program paid by DENTSU, sponsored by DENTSU. Mm-hmm. So I was sent to US like for 1 year. And studying at the short exec program at Columbia University and stay in New York. Right. And then the real association started. Okay. 1990 was a year for World Cup Italy.
Yes.
Then
I remember well.
Right. Yeah, nice one. Yeah,
we won. The right team won that one.
Oh, he was framed.
Okay, I don't want to hear about that one.
Penalty kick was given to Germany, West Germany.
Anyway, but
yeah, Maradona was crying.
Yeah, well, he had cheated before anyway, so it doesn't count.
Oh yeah, he has cheated 86. Yeah. So then, I met these DENTSU Mavericks, and they started hiring me.
Okay.
In the sports division of DENTSU.
Okay. And so, I mean, again, looking a bit at some of the points you mentioned here before. So all of a sudden there is Tour de France and the Olympics in Barcelona and the World Championship of Track and Field in Stuttgart. What role were you playing there? Because funny enough, the 93 IWF event in Stuttgart was my very first event. It was even before I got involved in the World Cup, of course, in 94. That was my very first internship as an MBA student at ISL. So you were there as well, I guess, but obviously you were properly working there. So what was your kind of role at that time?
I was doing sponsorship sales and activation. In the modern day, they call it activation. So I was in charge. In specific to Stuttgart, I was in charge of TDK.
Okay.
The TDK was a big sponsor and banner sponsor. So the TDK wanted to do some events, marketing, activation events around the event. So I did I don't say it's a freak show. It was like the training shows by long jumper Mike Powell.
Okay.
Mike Powell was the world record holder. So TDK and we did the kind of promotional shows in town of Stuttgart. Also, we hired kind of sub track, the training track of the Stuttgart Stadium. So we gather some media and then some kids to train under the instruction of Mike Powell, so how to fly 8.90 m.
Now you said you also in the sales side, so you were actually pitching sponsors, Japanese sponsors, packages for whatever Tour de France and Olympics and so on. Okay, I mean, just go back to that time. What was the sort of price points? I mean, what was the sort of numbers which you were putting out there and Japanese companies were buying into? You remember?
It was pretty. I mean, it's 30 years ago, so compared to now, it was pretty. I would say low number. I remember I sold the sponsorship package to Panasonic in 1994, 1995, Gothenburg World Athletic Championship.
World Championship.
It was like, I think it was like 6 million plus BIK, value in kind, provision of TV sets on Media Tribune and Obi Compound, etc. So it was like 6 million plus 1,000 TV sets. Something like that.
Okay. Yeah. And that was what, I guess that we didn't have euro yet at that time, I guess. So whatever, I guess in US dollars we're talking here, right?
It was US dollars,
So, did you then on the back of it, by selling, and I guess then you're doing the client servicing and the activation as well. So that gave you a chance, I guess, to go to the events itself, right? And be on the ground and get the exposure there. That must have been quite exciting.
Yeah, like, Barcelona games, back then, Japanese sponsor, we had like 4 or 5 Japanese sponsors back then.
Okay.
It was amazing. It was like, nowadays much smaller number, but like Panasonic, Ricoh, Brother Typewriter.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that one.
Company probably doesn't exist much anymore.
Yeah.
And Seiko.
Yes.
So it was like Fujifilm. It was like 5 sponsors. So it was like.
Yeah, no, interesting. And like you said, there was obviously some big rivalries, right? And Fuji and Kodak was probably as big as it gets, right? Where Kodak was, I guess, the Olympic sponsor, right? And Fuji ended up being the World Cup sponsor, right? Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, so Fuji was like, World Cup sponsor.
Correct.
So they are very cautious, cognizant of the ambushing each other.
Right.
So it was like, Kodak was an Olympic sponsor, top sponsor, but Fuji cannot do much. So yeah, Fuji was okay. It was like, there was a big, like almost like ambushing scandal. Was like Amex against Visa. Visa was the official Olympic sponsor.
Right.
The Amex advertised heavily around the Barcelona games. Their headline said, "You don't need a visa to get to Barcelona."
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. There's some interesting stories. I mean, of all of the sponsors you work with, if you look at the, the list of the big Japanese brands, which were the ones you felt really did the best job and maximized that exposure and maximized and leveraged, the brand, if you pick one or two?
I guess I would say Sony and Panasonic.
Okay.
Sony came on to join the FIFA partnership in 2006. So they've done the sponsorship for 2 cycles.
Right.
2010 and 14 World Cups.
Right. And that's obviously, you're talking about PlayStation here, right? That is really the main brand.
Yeah, that's right. PlayStation, correct. Televisions. They pay huge money for the FIFA sponsorship.
And Panasonic, they were obviously they're Olympic, right? They were in the Olympics for
the Olympic years, sponsors, right? Top sponsors. I would say they did a good job, promoting their technologies and brands and products around the event. So they did all the giant screen installation.
Right.
Example, in the Salt Lake City games in 2000, that's really big thing. So.
Right. And they also, if I remember, didn't they also go into cameras and some of the, the broadcast side of it, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was like up until like late 1990s, like, broadcast equipment business was like, Sony's market share was like 90%.
Right.
So the Panasonic, infiltrated into that market, especially forging a good relationship with OBS, the Olympic Broadcasting System. So back then, around the 2000s, I think 100% of the OBS equipment was
so they didn't just bring money, but they brought technology and, of course, their products and services to the games or to whatever the event was, right? I'm sure it's similar with NEC. Yeah. I'm sure they were heavily involved in some of that for the track and field side of it. It's funny, actually, that when we were talking about the 93 AWF event in Stuttgart, that's why I first met Papa Dijk, yes, and obviously there's a whole story behind all that, which has already been on a podcast. But did you work with him a bit, or in any of this? Because he was at ISL at that time too, right?
He was a colleague of mine at ISL.
Okay.
He was mostly traveling around the world. Well, I guess one thing, being an African, he doesn't like Lucerne, Switzerland, as an living environment that much.
Right.
And he was living with 2 other ISL colleagues, but I guess, he didn't like that much. And then there was a kind of unsavory story about him. Was like back then there was no mobile phones. The international phone calls were so expensive.
Right.
So there was a rumor that he kept calling his sisters in Senegal. So his international phone bill was like 40,000 Swiss francs.
Right, okay. I wouldn't write that off. Papa is a character, that's for sure.
Yeah, Papa was that.
Now, as you just said, you guys were colleagues because, from, you obviously, I don't know whether is the right term here, where you were seconded or there's a period of time where you had an ISL business card, right? So 94 to 97 here. So right. You were working there. Obviously, as we said earlier, DENTSU owned a slice of ISL, and then I guess you were there to represent, I guess, the Japanese interest and or the Japanese sponsors, right? Let's talk a bit about that. Those 3-4 years there. In ISL for you, because you worked almost across all the different things that we're doing, right? FIFA and IOC, you name it.
We went to South Africa together in January 1996. There's the African Cup of Nations, right? The CAF competition in South Africa.
Right.
And then Papa was sent out to South Africa by ISL's football department head. Back then was Stephen Dixon.
Yes.
Stephen Dixon was very disciplined, very strict, very hardworking guy. So Stephen doesn't like Papa's working style, floating around and moving around, talking to too many people. He was like really, cutting down and almost like pressuring Papa. He just criticized Papa, making so much advanced, unfulfillable promises to Coke and Visa.
Right. Okay.
Coke and MasterCard.
Right.
So Papa was like belittled figure in the African Cup of Nations marketing operation group.
Right.
And one day Stephen told Papa, buy or rent some picture frames, to decorate our offices. Make this office look, temporary office look more professional. The Papa said, "No, Stephen, I don't have any money." And Papa looked at me. I was sitting next to him. He said, "Papa, could you rent me your credit card, corporate credit card?" I said, "No, hell no, I don't want to give you my credit card. You're going to spend like thousands of Swiss francs out of my credit card." So.
Right. Yeah, that's a funny story.
So that was like a last day, one of the last days of Papa in ISL.
Right. Okay. Right. Interesting. I mean, like I said, we had Papa on, and of course, his story is a little different, but it's whatever. Somewhere in the middle is always probably what is the truth there. So your role then in ISL, for those few years, as I said earlier, is you were in your FIFA. ISL was representing FIFA and even UEFA. The IOC, IWF.
As well.
In terms of global rights and global federation, it doesn't get any bigger than this. And as you said already, major Japanese companies were sponsors: Canon, Fuji, JVC, Seiko, you name it.
Right.
So were you at that time? You were, I guess, already in Lucerne, right? You were in the ISL offices there.
That's right.
Being that sort of eyes and ears on the ground there, right? So was it really mostly just liaising and making sure that these big sponsors getting what they're supposed to be, what they're paid for, or how would you describe your role there during those times?
Well, I was kind of halfway between the ISL colleagues jokingly called I'm a DENTSU spy. So,
okay.
So that was part of the deal, part of the gig as well.
Right.
Just make sure ISL had been managed okay.
Right.
Not spending too much on any new investment or any irrational investments or anything like that. So I was attending these financial board meeting, sometimes management board meeting.
Right. So you were almost like a representative of DENTSU there, to not necessarily on a board level, but on a more operational level, to watch what ISL was doing.
Level. That's right. And then also do the sales to Japanese sponsors,
right?
Like Ricoh, Panasonic, JVC, and then also I help the marketing operations, sports operations, like ISL. When the event takes place for IWF or IOC or FIFA, I have to be on site, just make sure the advertising boards are in place and camera positions are okay, etc. So
that was my job at the World Cup. That's exactly what I did.
Yeah, it was
we had to start somewhere.
Same thing. Yeah, same
exactly.
thing.
You're lining up the boards before the match, and making sure the camera angles all work, and that's funny.
Yeah, all work exactly.
Yeah, that's the old way of doing it.
But looking back, Marcus, ISL was an amazing company.
Yes.
If you think about who owns all FIFA rights, UEFA rights, IOC, IWF.
Yeah, that's getting
and there are a
bigger.
few small federations like FIFA. But like
now, here's a question again, and I've always asked this to anyone who's ever worked with ISL: is what do you think, from your perspective, is what went wrong there? Right? Was it just greed? Was it stupidity? Was it a combo of many things? Because you obviously had left already. You moved back into DENTSU already by that time. It all went up in smoke. But it obviously, like I said, from being such a dominant player, you have to make a bunch of mistakes to then disappear completely, right?
Right. I think I can attribute that the failure of ISL to those. One is management stupidity,
Right.
and really over expansions,
Right.
and no control.
Right.
Back then ISL had the national representative called Chris Malms.
Mm-hmm.
He was the host Dastra's sister's husband.
Right.
And he was sent as sort of a Dastra representative.
Right.
And he was the CEO.
Right. But, and I think it coincided with Horst passing away, right? I think it was.
Yeah, Horst passed away in 1987.
Correct.
1987.
Yeah.
And then also another factor is the founder of team marketing, Klaus Hempel and Jürgen Lenz, have departed ISL around 1990-1991. So ISL kind of lost the key management people, and all powers concentrated on this Chris Malms. And in around 1997 to 2000, you may recall there was the first .com IT bubble.
Yes. There's
a lot of IPOs, a lot of floating started in the stock market. So around, I think since around 1996 to 2000, ISL started aiming for an IPO, especially idea of this Chris Malms. Chris Malms was the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School MBA graduate. So he's sort of a kind of his own agenda, own idea of making ISL publicly listed company and gaining $1 billion, get retired.
Right.
But in the process, ISL made a stupid investments like, this ATP tennis.
Yes.
They paid $2 billion, invested in the Formula One McLaren team, $500 million.
Yeah. And also they had some investment in South American football too, right? And they buy
South American football, like Vasco da Gama and those Brazilian teams and Argentinian teams. That was a pure stupidity. Nice. Also, the Chris Malms hired the guy named Heinz Schuttenberger, who came from Movenpick, the restaurant chocolate ice cream chain.
Okay.
He had no idea of what sports marketing is.
Right.
These two combination was like so odd, stupid, irrelevant, incompetent. So that led to
it's a shame, and it's interesting to hear your perspective on that, because as I say, it was anyone who does a bit of digs into the history books of sports marketing. I mean, ISL is as much there as it was IMG in the US and in other parts of the business. That was what ISL was with, and obviously IMG is still around and still doing what it does. Versus ISL is gone here. So now, so in your case, obviously, then we're getting now into sort of 1998 here, France World Cup in Paris, or the World Cup in France, Paris, and I think you're back in DENTSU now. You actually going to you're in the DENTSU Paris office, I guess, and working there. Right. So that is. Again, that was just a natural move back into the DENTSU fold, or how did that sort of worked out?
Yeah, it was like probably, after 3 years of doing some spying on ISL, fighting against Chris Marms to protect the Dentsu interest.
That's investment.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of move away and a little bit more, a little bit glamorous kind of, champagne and wining and dining in Paris.
Right. Why not?
And then,
which is where you are now today again, funny enough.
No, that's not anymore, Yeah, it was good working for Dentsu and liaising with the organizing committee of World Cup France '98.
Right. Yeah.
So in the process, I get acquainted with Michel Platini and Jacques Lambert, the organizing committee CEO. So yeah, it was a good 2 years, and interesting. The great World Cup.
Yeah,
great World Cup won by France.
Yeah. Now, then again, I guess right after that, right? I guess it looks like you sort of headed back to Tokyo.
Right.
And you set up a whole new division, or sort of, or a part of a whole new department, which now is going after TV rights, right? Which again wasn't really the business Dentsu was in before. So let's talk a bit about that. Again, now we're sort of, late 90s, early 2000 here, where all of a sudden, of course, the TV business around the world, pay TV and everything else is booming, taking off. And again, I'm sure Dentsu sees it and wants the size of the action. So what was Dentsu doing at that time?
It was like, in a way, being an advertising agency. So Dentsu had been sort of more leaning toward sponsorship side. So they never want to put their foot into TV rights or media rights.
Right.
Also, media rights, you have to own it, as you know. You have to kind of gamble, buy the rights, and you have to distribute them. So there's always, you have to do some kind of risk hedging rather than taking the big risk of, say, buying English Premier League rights for $1 billion. Then being an advertising agency cannot sit on one big chunk of rights like EPL. Yeah. So, back then, by the way, EPL rights were so small, much smaller.
Yeah, of course.
1998. But anyway, so it was like right timing. Dentsu and my immediate boss were really eager to get into media rights and TV rights business. We only started, like, the department only had like US Open tennis rights in Japan and some swimming championship rights in Japan. That was it when I joined back DENTSU Sports Marketing Division. Then when the first sort of a big deal we did was with Italian Serie A rights for 1999 to 2003. It was like a 4-year deal. And through the process, I met with Jerome Balk, the later Secretary General of FIFA. Yes. He was with Canal Plus, Sports right. Plus, Sports Plus.
They had the rights to Italy. Were they selling those, or?
Yeah. He had the worldwide rights of Serie A
at that time. Right.
The part of business, I think, extrapolate. How would I say? Stepping out of their traditional business of owning rights in France and Italy. He expanded into the business to Sports Plus.
Right.
So it kind of our Jerome Balk's growth as big rights businessman was kind of coincided with Dentsu's strategy to grow a media rights business.
I see.
So we made many deals with Serie A, La Liga, smaller ones like Belgian League, etc. So.
Okay. And you were involved in so you're acquiring, or what is your role in it?
Buying, also selling and distributing at the same time.
So And at the
Yeah.
beginning, sorry, was it you were mostly buying Japan rights only, or you were already buying Asian-wide rights or global, or what was the sort of remit at that time?
I was like initially to buying the Japan rights only.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, get the FIFA World Cup rights for Japan,
Right.
206. So 202 was Japan was a host
In
country,
Japan,
so
yeah.
that was a big deal.
Yes.
Also, like Bundesliga rights, we got the rights. I got the rights from UFA Sports in Hamburg.
Right. Now, of all of them, again, currently you're still buying it mostly for Japan. If you look back at all this, the list of things you bought, I think at one point you mentioned you also had Major League Baseball, right? Which I think was one of the biggest, really, right? And of course, anyone who knows a bit about baseball and the connection between Japan and the US is a huge sport, and of course, some of the biggest stars are Japanese or have been Japanese over the years. We still again here sort of in the early, let's say 2000s at that time. How big was it already at that time? Were there already Japanese players in the league in the US playing, and therefore that's the reason the rights were so big, or what drove that?
Yeah, the 1995 was the first year the Japanese player joined Major League Baseball.
Okay.
It was Hideo Nomo, the pitcher for LA Dodgers.
Okay.
Then all of a sudden, the Major League Baseball rights became so big. Before 1995, it was like pennies. It was like few thousands, few $1,000s.
Right. And is it? I mean, again, do you looking with just at whatever you might know, and still if you follow it, has that growth continued? I mean, Japan is still obviously a major baseball market anyway, right? In its own right with their own league and all this stuff. But but the MLB, I believe, is still it's a massive package there, right? So it has continued to grow, right?
Yeah, it has stayed flat. Like Japan's major public broadcaster, NHK. Not last few years, but at its peak, they are broadcasting like four games per day, 4 Major League Baseball games per day in the different channels. So my friend at MLB was telling me the NHK is the largest baseball broadcaster in the world.
Right.
They are roughly 2,400 games of MLB. They're broadcasting like 900 games per year.
Wow.
At one point.
And obviously, it must have been on multiple channels, right? I mean, you can't.
Yeah, multiple channels. Yeah, like 3-4 channels.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and again, that's sort of why I'm picking a bit on it is also, anyone who ever gets involved in distribution of rights, we all know the world has dramatically changed, but one thing which never fails is that if you have local talent inside, right, that drives rights, right? And I think looking at Serie A, I think the reason it was so popular in Japan is similar, right? You had some good Japanese players, right? You had some national team players who played there, right? So it's a bit of parallel, right? Would you agree?
It's parallel, right? In Nakata, right? I think like in Germany, NBA rights became big because you have decent German players in
NBA. Exactly.
Yeah, Nowitzki.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think that is it's just such a good one. Again, for anyone listening, that those things do work. There are plenty of great examples, and Japan has always been. I think that I think there have been I know stories about the league, especially Serie A and others, where they deliberately targeted that, right? They deliberately did this because they knew the rights fees there would go, and in a sense, almost kind of refinancing that investment then in Japanese talent, right? Almost on the back of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Serie A was the first one, then followed by Bundesliga.
Right.
I think now the Bundesliga has the most number of Japanese football players.
All right. Okay.
As an European league. So.
Now, do you think that still works? I mean, you feel, was that a nice trick which worked before, but the Japanese, fans or the Japanese public kind of got bored of it, or it still catches the imagination there?
I think it still works. As I look at Japanese media, not only TV, but like on net and portal. Right. Normally, they only cover Japanese players.
Right.
Like Japanese players in football, Japanese players baseball. Yeah. Only a little bit on Lionel Messi or only a little bit on Mike Trout or those big stars. So
Right. But it's so it
hasn't
is
changed.
still heavily focused on their own stars, right? Whether it's in
Right.
golf or tennis or wherever they show
Yeah,
up, right?
golf is the same way. Yeah, golf
Correct.
when Japanese players win the Masters, and then
Correct.
all of a sudden golf became big.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, I want to chat a bit about AFC because, again, I'm not sure whether you were involved in this, but DENTSU also had a stake in World Sport Group, which again isn't well known in most circles. And I don't have to remember. I can't recall when they did this investment. It might have been mid '90s when Seamus started, right? So now that again was sort of one of these little quieter arrangements where, obviously DENTSU again brought that huge firepower and the Japanese money into the Asian Football Confederation, both from, of course, sponsorship and from a media point of view. Were you all involved in this, or you know a bit about it, or?
No, I was not really heavily involved in the dealing with Seamus O'Brien, but Seamus O'Brien teamed up with Jack Sakazaki.
Yes, that's right.
The old friend of mine.
JSM.
So Seamus and Jack team up. Initially, Jack invested into World Sports Group.
Ah, right, okay.
Then somehow Seamus, Jack came to DENTSU. I guess asked for a little bit more investment. So DENTSU started investing in World Sports Group. That was like 1996, 7, 8.
Right.
AFC package, AFC, like World Cup qualifying matches, AFC Championship, all those games, matches are very...
Correct. And they're huge, exactly.
I value...
Yeah. You have a Japanese, not just the national team playing, but even the club teams obviously do well in the AFC competition. So again, like you said, there is that local appetite and interest for it, right?
Yeah, but now times have changed. This Patrick Murphy and DDMC has taken over AFC. Now they became AFC marketing. So
correct.
Yeah, now it's no DENTSU involvement.
I mean, do you see them? I don't know how much you follow it. Obviously you're sitting in the FIFA world now, and therefore I'm sure you see a bit what the AFC is doing. Do they struggle because they don't have that big firepower of DENTSU anymore behind them, or they partnered up? They still partnered up with agencies there, or are they really doing it on their own? What do you see happening there?
Well, I think to cut the long story short, this AFC marketing, the Patrick Murphy's company, is heavily relying on the Chinese money. The DDC investors. So I think their financial plan is recuperate their investment through Chinese money, Chinese investment.
Yeah, that's the key market. Yeah, Patrick was on my podcast as well, so we kind of went a bit around all this stuff, but just see what's the parallel with what Seamus did with Japan, which at that time was obviously the key market, and now maybe you can argue China is the key market where maybe the bigger money could come out of or should come out of, but that doesn't mean Japan isn't important to the puzzle there. I'm sure till today, and it will be going in the future. So you spent several years there, and that kind of led into where you are now, right? Let's get into the world of FIFA. So how did you ended up from doing what you're doing there? All of a sudden you're landing, back in Zurich.
Well, back in Japan, I somehow wanted to move back to Europe. Kind of, in a way. Somehow I have more industry friends in Europe than in Japan, and kind of, I didn't like the Japanese lifestyle that much, like especially the business circle. You have to go out, entertain your clients, like almost every day.
Yep.
Yeah, like, going out for drinking and dining in the Japanese way. So it's like almost like 24/7, you are dealing with the Japanese broadcaster or something. So it wasn't
your thing.
It wasn't it wasn't for me. So probably European lifestyle fits better. Then I had a few contacts back in Europe, including John Bauk and Massimo Migani of Right Trade, and so I just wanted to move on. Then I moved to Switzerland, Zurich, Switzerland, 2003, as sort of as a secondment from Dentsu to there was a Dentsu Publicis joint venture in Zurich for 2003 to 2007. So I just worked there for 1 year. Then I decided to join FIFA. It was kind of a fortunate timing. John Bauk joined FIFA in 2003 as marketing director from Sports Plus. So he was there. So actually, on some business talk, I was dealing with him. So I just, decided to
it was time
to
move
ships.
On. Yeah, I mean, after at that time you've been, as I said, 20 years with Dentsu, even though you kind of moved around the world, right? You weren't really only in Japan. Obviously, you were in many stops around the world. So clearly never a boring time, I'm sure, even if it was the same company. But here you are now at the federation side, right? I mean, it's I would argue somewhat a big shift, right? Going from being an agency and always sort of, representing the client side of it, and now you are the client. How was it? I mean, just was it difficult, or just a very natural thing because you spent so much time with these federations anyway?
Well, I would say it was kind of easy, yes, but kind of different in a way, kind of no, because I thought when you're in a commercial entity, you've been driven by commercial denominator only. Your task, your assignment is make more money. Whatever happens, make more money, make more profit. Right. How many millions, how many zillions you make money for Dentsu. That was the commercial benchmark. Right. But once you're in federation, you have to deal with something more, how do I say, corporate, something more federation, politically correct. Right. So you cannot just jump on to make more money only. Right. You have to take care of certain federations' needs. You have to take care of certain confederations' opinions. Right.
I mean, if you for someone who's not from the industry, and it just doesn't know how this works. I mean, the statement of saying that federations are really political animals isn't probably far off, right? From your own experience, would you be correct?
Yeah, that's right. So federations are political. So it's kind of, as you know, the commercial company is driven by money, driven by shareholders' voices. Yeah. If you make more money, your stock price go up, then you'll be celebrated. But FIFA is not like that. If you make 3 billion more, but you have to say gain sort of a social approvals and popularity from the federation stakeholders, which is FAs, which are like a football association. So in a way, you have to please different stakeholders than commercial ventures, commercial companies. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, Now let's dig a bit around here. I mean, when you joined, again, what was your role, and how has that role obviously been involved? Now 17 years, I'm sure usually you're doing multiple things. But with your background in advertising, working with sponsors, and at the end of part, which we talked about already, you were heavily involved in media rights. I mean, you come obviously with a great skill set there. But what was it really what FIFA needed you or wanted you or you were doing with them over those years?
Just Jerome hired me as sort of deputy director in charge of business development, both in media rights sales and sponsorship.
Okay.
It was in a way lucky. FIFA was in the transition period from ISO bankruptcy,
right,
also QF Media bankruptcy.
right.
So FIFA lost the two commercial arms in media rights and sponsorship.
And I mean, there were rumors FIFA will go and blow up, right? I mean, if I remember those days.
FIFA was in danger of insolvency.
Correct.
Around 2002, 2003.
That's right.
So it was a period of transition. FIFA set up its own commercial body called FIFA Marketing and AG in Zug, Switzerland. Also, to salvage the financial status, FIFA went on the financial market at the ABS asset-backed securitization.
Okay.
So FIFA get the infusion of billions of dollars through a financial market.
Interesting.
Yeah. Securitization.
Yeah, that's right. That's now. So yeah, I mean, obviously, FIFA got his house back in order, and today are back on strong footings there. But like you said, there weren't, and it obviously again had a lot to do with that agency or the agencies behind it just creating a huge mess. So from 2004, let's say the first 10 years there, again, FIFA had its own, once it got out of that, it kind of got itself in the next challenge year, right? But before we get into 2015, which is sort of another watershed year, obviously, for FIFA, let's talk a bit about the first 10 years, maybe some of the things that we're doing and what you saw. We got 2006 World Cup in Germany. You were already there. You got 2010 South Africa. I mean, all major events, very successful again. So let's just have some interesting stories around those events or things which you were doing at that time.
Well, I would say it was really FIFA turned into commercial driven entity. Like first 10 years was under the leadership of Jerome Bauk, in essence.
Okay.
So he was driving, he started selling the sponsorship package like twice as a higher price than the previous packages.
Right.
He was successful. Also, we sold the TV rights by ourselves worldwide. The revenue jumped I would say 300-400%. The QISL guarantee was 2.3 billion Swiss franc for 2 cycles.
Right.
Now we're getting $5 million for 2 cycles. So it was more than 250% of increase.
Yeah, doubling.
It was
So you were, and you had specific territories where you were in charge of, or?
Yeah, I was in charge of whole Asia, whole Asia and Africa. So
right, okay, and that was both sponsorship and TV, because at the end of the day, you obviously had experience in both, or were you focused on one more than the other?
My weight is more on media rights, TV rights sales.
Right.
Initially, I helped the Sony deal to come in.
Right.
As a FIFA partnership. So the initial contact with Sony have been initiated by myself, and then Jerome went in and made a big deal out of Sony.
Interesting. Now, I mean, Jerome, hopefully one day he'll be on the podcast and we'll hear his side of the story on it. Of course, as successful as he was, he had some an unfortunate departure, I would say, right? Where he got tangled up into the MasterCard Visa saga, and I think, in my view, was sort of left out hanging dry there on it. Again, I know you, for you is maybe a bit sensitive, but what were your reading of it, and what is it? How you would describe what happened there?
That's very difficult to comment.
Yes,
The Mastercard Visa stuff. The change from Mastercard to Visa was directed by Sepp Blatter.
Right. Okay.
So we had the equivalent offers, the same offers from Visa and Mastercard.
All right. Okay.
And we have part-signed contract on the table.
Right.
So Mastercard signed, Visa signed, and it was like FIFA's choice to execute either or.
Right. Okay.
Well, maybe this is sensitive. Well, but it's still already in the.
Yeah, some of that is exactly.
Judgment is in the public record of.
Correct.
Federal Court of New York.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because they had matching rights, right? And that's sort of where it all went up a bit pear-shaped, right?
Yeah, pear-shaped. I mean, so the Mastercard had been FIFA sponsors since 1986.
Right, yeah, long time.
So already they were the FIFA sponsor for 20 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Mastercard was told, no, we're going to choose Visa. You are let go. But I understand Mastercard's indignant.
Yeah, I think everyone could follow that. Yeah. Why was there the sense of that they wanted to switch? I mean, the money is the same, everything else is the same. It was just, where would that be the logic there?
I only can guess. But before that Mastercard Visa court case, Mastercard was doing a few litigations against FIFA.
Right.
For one instance was, remember 2 globe logo of FIFA? And Mastercard picked on that. Mastercard said this is too similar to Mastercard logo, so Mastercard triggered litigations against FIFA.
Clearly, it wasn't handled right, I would say, on so many levels. If you look back at, in '94, when we were both at the World Cup there in the US, I think FIFA had what you said, 30, 40 people maybe.
Yeah, 30 people. Yeah.
Yeah, and now you are 1,000 people strong.
Yeah, 1,000.
Which again, when you mentioned that last time, I was blown away the size of the organization. So let's talk a bit about that, right? How FIFA has grown, and in a sense also how it's completely changed itself, and all the things it's doing. And I think one of your comments was that basically everything was somewhat brought in house, right? From previously.
Yeah, brought in house. Yeah, right? Everything is internalized.
Yeah.
Also, like something like modern day new division has been created. Now we have sustainability division, we have the pitch management department, we have all those things. We have the ticketing agent on our own. We internalized the whole ticketing agency, ticketing department inside.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Hide, thanks so much for your time here. This was a lot of fun spending a good hour with you, a little more, reminiscing around your DENTSU career. And of course, we had a chance to take a little look into the FIFA world. Obviously, since you're still there, certain comments and answers, of course, are sensitive, which I fully appreciate. So that's why we kept that part a little shorter. But great to connect again. I wish you all the best here. We got a FIFA World Cup around the corner again next year, which I'm sure you'll be in Qatar. And, hopefully everything goes well there. And hopefully I'll see you there.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great. I think we can continue talking about these episodes, anecdotes with you over wine or nice drinks in Kuala Lumpur or somewhere in Asia.
Absolutely.
That I love to do.
We keep doing that. So you have a good day there in Paris, where you are now, and of course Zurich, which is your normal place of operation. And we'll catch up again soon. Yeah, great. Great to talk with you. Thanks, Hide. Thank you. Have a nice day. You too. Bye-bye. The Sports Entrepreneurs by Marcus Luer podcasts are a collection of interviews and stories. All content in this podcast is the copyright of Marcus Luer. Reproduction and distribution of the presentation without written permission of the owner is prohibited. All rights reserved.